In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about how to make your travel expenses a business deductible travel expenses. So we're going to break it down in two, right? First, we're going to talk about foreign travel. Then I'm going to talk about domestic travel within the United States. I don't have that on the board yet, right? But we're going to fit this into here. And then we're going to talk about how to make your meals tax deductible. Now, I want to make a point, and I want to make this very, very clear. When we're going to be talking about travel expenses, I'm referring specifically, when we say travel, is to a transportation expense, right? How do you get to your destination, whether it be, airplane, by boat, by car, or whatever that is. We're not talking about lodging or meals, right? That is a separate category that can be deducted always when it's directly related to that travel, those travel days. And we're not gonna talk about that today. What we're gonna primarily be focused on are travel expenses, how to make that 100% deductible. Again, travel expenses, when you get on the airplane or you drive, how to make that 100% tax deductible. That's really what we're gonna talk about, and that's what we're gonna focus on. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put it in the chat. Now, let's start with the foreign travel, okay? Because that's the travel that I really wanted to start off with, because the regulations and rules on this are actually much simpler when you're traveling inside the United States, okay? Generally speaking, first of all, in order for your travel to be considered business purpose travel, it needs to be for the sole purpose of the business, right? It cannot be, I'm going on vacation, but I'm going to do travel. It is, I'm going on vacation, but I'm going to do business, right? It has to be, I'm going on a business trip, and if there's vacation days to fit in, you'll fit it in. And we'll see how we can make that work, and at the same time, make it 100% tax deductible, all right? So, first of all, we have to establish that the sole purpose of your travel is business. You're going there for business, but you might not spend all the days as a business. Can we still deduct our travel? The answer is yes. First of all, there is a general rule. General rule is that you allocate percentage spent on business, percentage spent on personal, and you get to deduct your travel expenses. Again, this is outside of the United States, but there are two exceptions to the general rule, and we're going to talk about those exceptions today so that you can make your travel 100% deductible. Exception rule number one: when you're traveling outside of the United States, a foreign travel, if you meet the 7-day rule, 7 days, 7 consecutive days, right? Whether it's weekends or weekdays, and it's less than 7 consecutive days, then the entire travel becomes 100% deductible. Let's say you had a business meeting in Italy and you traveled for 3 days, right? You traveled for 3 days for the purpose of the business meeting. You've spent 1 day at this seminar or at this meeting that you were not in control of arranging, so to speak, right? You were told you need to come here, or you needed to be there for that business purpose. You needed to be there for the business. You spent 1 day at the business meeting. The other 2 days you spent sightseeing. Well, guess what? The travel, right? What you paid to get to your destination will become 100% tax deductible. Why? Because you're meeting the 7-day rule. You don't need to spend the majority of your time on business, okay? As long as you were less than 7 days, you fulfilled the mission of your business. You were there for the sole purpose of the business. So now that you've been there less than 7 days, you traveled for the sole purpose of the business. The entire travel, whatever you paid for the airfare, is now 100% tax deductible. Now let's say you've traveled for more than 7 days. Can you still make it deductible? We're coming back to the general rule. The answer is yes. You allocate. What's the percentage? Use 50-50, then 50% of the business, whatever you paid for the airplane, is deductible. But if you've spent the majority of your time, and the majority of your time is defined by the IRS saying if you spent less than 25% on non-business activities, other words, personal activities. If you spent less than 25% on personal activities, on non-business, which is personal days, then that's okay, because you can still deduct 100% of the time because it was less than 25%. Again, we're talking about a foreign travel, okay? foreign travel and domestic travel within the United States have different rules. So we are now in a foreign travel rule for those of you who are just joining in, okay? So we're gonna summarize it. I'm gonna keep it, and I'm trying to keep it very simple and very brief for you so that you can understand what is deductible 100%. Again, the sole purpose has to be business. You're traveling to a foreign country that is outside of the 50 states, right? You've traveled to a foreign country. The general rule is that you would have to allocate what was for the business and what was for the personal, and that's how you can deduct travel. And we said travel includes what you paid for the airfare or for you to get to that destination. Now, in order for you to qualify 100% of deduction for your travel to pay for your airplane ticket, for example, you have to meet one of the following rules, right? We have two exceptions here. Number one, the travel was less than 7 days. Number two, if it was more than 7 days, but less than 25% of the time was spent on personal, non-business activities, then the entire travel becomes 100%. Now, let's say you're wondering, what about my lodging and my meals? What is deductible in this scenario? Do I deduct 100% of lodging? Do I deduct 100% of meals? Since, let's say, we gave an example earlier, you go to Italy for 3 days, you spend 1 day on business, the travel becomes 100% deductible. While lodging only becomes a portion deductible, which you spent on business. So if you spent 1 day, you needed to be there an overnight, you needed to travel and stay overnight to stay in that business meeting, that lodging only for that day out of those 3 days will be deductible. Any meals related directly to the business purpose would be deductible, but not for the other 2 days that you spent sightseeing, you spent money on a hotel, or you went out to a restaurant. Those would not be deductible. What is 100% deductible, like we said, would be for the travel expenses. Is everybody with me so far? Good. Now, let's continue. Now, we've talked about a foreign travel. What about domestic travel? I'm going to put that in a blue marker, right? What about domestic travel within the United States? Okay. Well, we have to meet the definition of a travel day when it comes to a domestic travel, right? Within the United States. We're going to use 2 states as an example. State of New York, where I am located at, right? We should have done that. Give me a second. Let's just fix this back. Okay. Within the United States, right? We've got New York and we've got, give me a state. Let's use Florida because we've got an office in Florida. All right, anyways. So let's say New York and Florida, but let's assume I don't have an office in Florida because that would be a bad example to use. Let's just use Florida, destination place. New York is a home place, a tax home place. A tax home place is really defined where your tax home is, which is where the business is. We're assuming you live and you work in the state of New York, okay? Now, you need to travel to Florida for a business purpose. Now, in order for you to deduct your travel, right, we need to make sure you have, well, not only travel, everything else that comes with it, right? You need to make sure you have a travel day established. What is a travel day? A travel day is when you spent overnight, right, in Florida. So let's say you left New York and you went to Florida. Now, you needed to be there overnight to fulfill your business purpose or whatever that may have been, okay? You stayed there overnight. Now, what becomes deductible when you spend a travel day there, when you went overnight? Number one, it's going to be travel expense itself. What you paid for to get to your destination, right? Whether it was an airplane or however else you got there, right? Let's assume it was an airfare, okay? Travel. Now, lodging, you stayed at that place for lodging, right? That becomes deductible. And meals, okay? Now, you're able to deduct all of these as a business expense. Now, when you are in Florida, right, for a business travel, you need to meet a 50% rule. That means more than 50% of that day has to be attributable to the business purpose. What is the 50% of the day rule? It's not 12 hours, right? In the United States, 8 hours is considered a work day. That means 4 hours or more is spent on working, right? Some of your industries might say, well, In my day, it's less than 8 hours per workday. Okay, let's just stay with IRS this definition and what IRS considers a workday, because that is what they're really focused on. Okay, so we've got 4 hours or more. So if we are traveling, we left New York Monday afternoon. We got there Monday afternoon, right? It's only a couple of hours trip there, but we stayed overnight because we had a conference here. Let's say we had a conference. We left on Monday. We have a conference on Tuesday. Okay, can you travel to Florida and deduct all of your expenses on Monday, even though the conference starts on Tuesday? The answer is yes. Why? Because the conference starts early in the morning for most of it, and you needed to be a day before there. So all of those expenses will be deductible because you traveled for that purpose, even if you travel a day before. So everything is actually deductible when it relates to your trip. I've just listed 3 things here. For example, you paid for Wi-Fi on the airplane, that becomes deductible. You tipped the doorman, or the guy who brings up your luggage, that is tax deductible. Everything, because you have a travel day, right? You're traveling for 1 day or more, and it's an overnight travel. That's what's important, is that it's an overnight travel. Another interesting thing to consider here, let's say you traveled on a trip on Thursday. The business meeting is taking place on a Friday and on a Monday. The weekend is sandwiched in between. So does that mean that I am now forced to stay the weekend so that I can attend my business meeting? Now, does that mean that the weekend expenses such as lodging and meals are not deductible? No, actually they are deductible because it was outside of your control. The business took place on a normal weekday, but it forced you to be there on a weekend, right? Now, IRS is going to take a look at it and be like, hey, hold on a second. Wasn't the place where you were supposed to go for business only like 60 miles away, and you went overnight and you didn't really have to stay there overnight? Then they might allow those expenses. So you want to make sure that you're obviously going to a place where you really cannot get there in a one day worth of time, right? So that's why I'm kind of using Florida over here, because it's going to be a disaster to drive back and forth in 1 day, right? So anyways, so that's what it becomes. So this is the travel days between the United States, within the United States. Let's say we're going to reverse this. We're not going overnight, right? We're going for a day. I'm leaving in the morning to travel to Long Island. We have a place called Long Island here in New York, right? Or somewhere upstate. And it takes me 2 hours to get there. I traveled there, I spent the conference, or I did my business meeting, and then I came back. Okay, well, you're missing out on lodging deductions right here, right? Because you don't have lodging. And what you're also maybe missing out on is also meals expenses, because this is not considered travel meals. Usually meals are deductible when you are taking out a prospect or a client, right? Or you're traveling overnight. Okay, when you're traveling overnight, those meals become deductible. This would not be an overnight travel, which could limit you on your meals deduction. So not everything becomes deductible. So when you are traveling, right, to another state, for example, right, what you want to make sure is that if you're going to travel for a week, you want to try to figure out which days you can use more than 4 hours or more on working. Whether you're a real estate investor, where you're looking at properties, or you're meeting with your clients, or you're doing some work-related activities there, you must be there. You're required to be there. You kind of plan all of that out to be able to deduct not only your domestic, but also your foreign travel. I hope this is clear. If you have any questions, I would love to take any questions that we have right now in the chat. Thanks so much.